Chapter 2. Meeting the Boys. I managed to get in about a week of training before we arrived at Dawn Island, and I took up a position at the bow as we pulled into port. I noticed that Garp had changed into a sleek black suit. While his men traveled into Windmill Village to resupply, he set off along the beach and I followed him. Near the shore, down a ways from the docks, sat a small makeshift raft with a poorly drawn Jolly Roger hanging off its mast. A young child, wearing a familiar straw hat upon his raven locks, stood proudly beside his crude construction. I felt the dark aura radiating from Garp as he stomped through the sand towards him, and I gulped, trailing behind nervously. "Luffy!" Garp roared. "What the hell do you think you're doing, you brat?" Luffy cackled. "I'm gonna become the king of the pirates!" he declared to the sky. Veins bulged on Garp's forehead. "Like hell you are!" He leapt forward, smashing the raft to smithereens with a single punch. "You're gonna become a strong Navy soldier!" Luffy scowled, narrowing his eyes. "That was my ship, Grandpa!" Garp lifted him by his cheek, which stretched a good 4 or 5 inches. "Ow, ow, 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 ow!" "From this day on, you'll be staying with Dadan," Garp told him sternly. "She'll teach you right." I tried not to snort at that. Garp started off toward the distant mountain, then he paused, remembering that I was there. "Oh yeah, Luffy, this is..." He scratched his head. "Bwahaha! I forgot to ask your name." "Oh, I'm Aly." I thought for a moment. "Haruki D. Aly. It's nice to meet you, Luffy." Luffy flashed a dazzling grin at me. "Hi!" Then, realizing he was still in Garp's bruising grip, he started kicking his legs around furiously. "Let go, Grandpa!" he yelled. We traveled up the mountain and through the deadly forest, with Luffy and Garp still arguing. I didn't see a single beast along the way, which I thought was odd, until I remembered who I was with. They were probably giving Garp a wide berth. A couple of hours later, we emerged into a large clearing, wherein sat the mountain bandit house. Garp finally released Luffy, who started zipping back and forth around the clearing. He walked up to the house and pounded firmly on the wooden door. A large copper-haired woman yanked it open angrily, a feral growl dying in her throat as she shrank in fear, eyes widening. "Garp-san! We weren't expecting you. What brings you by?" Garp snagged Luffy's collar as he ran past and held him up while pushing me forward. "This is my grandson, Luffy, and my new granddaughter, Aly. Take care of them, Dadan." Dadan tried to protest, but eventually accepted after Garp threatened to arrest her. Then Garp peaced out, disappearing back into the trees. It was just us and the bandits now. A glob of spit hit Luffy's face, and I smirked. And Ace. Dadan introduced us to the bandits, after they tried to threaten us, of course. She then went off to cook dinner, and soon the air filled with the smell of roasted meat. I started to drool. I knew what was coming, so I was prepared for the sudden feeding frenzy. As soon as the plate touched the floor, I darted in, punching 2 bandits in the face, and squirreled a hunk of meat off to the corner to eat undisturbed. It wasn't until I finished my food that it struck me what I had done. Even though I played by the rules of the house, I still felt bad, so I sought out the 2 bandits I had hit. "I'm sorry for punching you," I said, bowing. They both scratched the backs of their necks, blushing slightly, and said in unison, "It's fine, don't worry about it." Oh right, bandits. They probably weren't exactly accustomed to people being polite to them. I sat back down and listened as Luffy complained loudly to Dadan about his lack of food. My eyes tracked Ace as he silently ate and left the room. When Luffy followed him curiously, I leapt to my feet. "Wait," I thought, "don't leave me here!" I flung open the front door and raced after them. I had just reached Luffy when a giant rolling tree came barreling towards us. My reaction time was too slow, and I took it straight to the face as it flattened me into the ground. Luffy didn't fare much better, but at least he was rubber. I got a broken nose. He took off after Ace again, and I followed, albeit at a much slower pace this time. I watched as Ace swung his pipe, knocking Luffy clear off the bridge. My eyes widened as Luffy tried to grab something to stop his fall, but instead snagged my shirt. You idiot! I screamed as we both plummeted toward the rushing river far below. We got separated from each other during the fall, and I landed in the water with a large, skin-stinging splash. I immediately flailed around in panic. I had never learned how to swim. Bobbing in and out of the water, I became disoriented quickly, but thankfully the current carried me to a slower, shallower stretch of river. I clawed at the riverbed, dragging myself out of the stream. My stomach gurgled, and shortly I was on my knees, expunging the liquid I had swallowed. Getting to my feet, I took a deep breath and released it slowly. I looked around anxiously at the ominous trees, terror gripping my chest. I didn't want to be in this place alone. I knew the types of creatures that dwelt here. What I didn't know was how to get back to Dadan's. I crossed my fingers, picked a random direction, and started running. Okay, I felt like I could give Zoro a run for his money at this point. I'd been wandering around in the trees for 12 days straight. Luckily, I found a few ripe blackberry bushes, or I might have starved to death. I also got badly scratched up by said bushes, but that's neither here nor there. Over the past week and a half, I had fallen into quicksand, been chased by wolves, was nearly eaten by a giant snake, and to top it all off, I was still lost. And so very, very alone. I sat down at the base of a tree and hugged my trembling knees to my chest, feeling the sting of tears in my eyes. It was going to get dark again soon. After several minutes, I heard a twig snap, and I glanced up sharply, ready to bolt. I wiped my eyes to clear my vision, and blinked. A blonde-haired boy, wearing a suit and a familiar top hat, stood in the bushes nearby, staring at me.